Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, a brand new guest talking about their experience in their life in the world of martial arts and everything else. My guest this week is an associate professor at North Dakota State University with a Ph.D. in Biochemistry and Molecular Biophysics. He's had over 66 publications, and his research focuses on obesity that affects more than 1.4 billion people worldwide. And if my research is correct, he's also one of only about 140 people to receive his black belt from legendary instructor Ralph Castro. Please welcome to the show, Glenn Dorsam. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
Good. So as we do with all my guests, let's just jump in and go back to the beginning and talk about that first spark. Where did that first interest in martial arts come from?
Well, first, I didn't know I was one of 144 from Ralph Castro, so that was very interesting. Thank you for that.
I found a website, ShaolinKenpo.com, and Ralph Castro, and it says Great Grandmaster Ralph Castro, Shaolin Kenpo black belts who received the rank of black belt from him.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's if my math is right, it's I think it's actually 134, 135 on this list. I don't know because the last one was 2010, so if that's when he retired. Or no, excuse me, 2014. 2014 looks like the newest one on there. So it sounds correct.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and he passed away recently.
Yeah,
too.
2019, I believe. So yeah, I mean that's pretty cool. I mean,
yeah,
I know a lot of black belts, and I know in the hundreds, if not some of them thousands, that have given up black belts over their current martial arts. So to be one of less than 150. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So thank you.
Cool. No problem.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, for me, I started my martial arts training essentially the day I graduated high school. Okay. And I always was fascinated with martial arts. I loved any martial arts movie. I was a martial arts movie junkie, sci-fi type of thing. And no martial arts before 18 years old, really. I had done track and football, so I kept myself moving, and I was always working out somehow. But I remember in Winchester, Massachusetts, it all started after high school, and I knew I wanted to get my black belt, and I wanted to train. Probably what made me go into martial arts was I tell my kids when I was young, in Vermont, I had my Halloween candy stolen from me 2 years in a row.
Really?
And I remember the second time I went out after I had my Halloween candy stolen the year before, and I told myself, okay, this year, no one's going to steal my candy. And I remember I was walking with a few other people, and this really big guy with a black coat came and just grabbed it was a pillowcase full of candy. And I held on to that pillowcase as hard as I could, and we were swinging around, almost doing a pirouette together. And then he was just too strong. So he stole my candy again. So I went home crying, and I was about 9. So that probably stuck with me. And that was the impetus for me to get into martial arts. I knew I wanted to do that, and I wasn't going to do anything. I was a fairly fast runner. I went to run at Michigan State, but I wasn't good enough to do anything nationally. I had aspirations to go to the Olympics. That didn't work out. So martial arts was a good athletic medium for me. And I started in Winchester. I don't know the person's name. I probably wouldn't say, even if I knew it, because I don't think he was very honest.
Okay.
And I remember giving him some money and saying I would really like to work out. And something about how he wouldn't give me my gi and then I had to pay extra money or something like this. So I thought it was kind of a second-rate school, and as I later found out, it probably was. But there were some bags in there. It was a small work area, and I did my first front kick and side kick and roundhouse kick, and it was fun. I think I did. I don't know if I actually ever got my uniform from him, and I only took maybe during the summer after high school. So after getting that initial taste of martial arts and realizing that I could do it and it was fun, I went to Michigan State and I joined a school-sponsored martial arts style called Shorin-ryu, and it's a Japanese style. It's a hard style. It's kind of like Shotokan.
Mm-hmm.
But it was it was a lot of two-hand motions. So almost everything was block with two hands and then counter and then block a kick with two hands, and it was a beautiful sweeping type of style.
Mm-hmm.
And some really, really good martial artists. I respected all of them. And the person who ran the dojo, as they called it, since it was Japanese, Master Iha. And he was a short man. I think he did yard work and he did snow removal and he ran this school. And I may have the information slightly off, but I think he was an 8th degree black belt in Shorin-ryu, and the way that they described it was him and someone else, I think in South Africa, who was also an 8th degree, and he was the highest ranking Shorin-ryu person in the United States, and he was in East Lansing, and
wow.
And he was just awesome. And the way that he would teach us, he showed me this maneuver where there was a kick to the face, and he would do his two-hand motion where he would block it with one hand and then sweep it with the other hand. And the way that he did it was so fluid and beautiful. And that's the person that ran the school, Shorin-ryu. There were a lot of black belts in his school that had been with him for decades. So I think that speaks for itself at how good the school is. And some really talented individuals, and also not some talented individuals. There are some people who weren't that athletically inclined, but they knew their stuff. And one really funny story. So this was a style, they had a class at Michigan State. So they sent a black belt out, and he was a really nice guy. He called me Judge, and I don't know why he called me Judge. Maybe because I did the rules well or something like that. But he called me Judge for some reason. And he was a very, very good martial artist. This was old school. So, we came in, we bowed, we kneeled, we did all of the pomp and circumstance. That's where I learned how to count to 10 in Japanese. Ichi, ni, san, kuju, reach, kuju, I forget now. And we'd always do that as we're doing our stretching and our kicking. And it was rote, right? We would, after our stretching for 5 or 10 minutes, we would then do our kicks, ichi, ni, san, chi, go, rook, and then kicks right, left, front kick, back kick, side kick. And then we'd work with partners and we'd do our dances. And there was a beauty to that. And I really enjoyed that type of training. And I've applied it to a lot of things in my life, studying biochemistry, studying for exams. And I would just do the exact same thing. I'd get my note cards. I write out all of the vocabulary for a particular chapter, and every single day I'd go over my note cards and I'd go over the vocabulary. I would write out the structures, the chemical structures, and I applied the Eastern philosophy of practicing the same thing over and over and over and over. And it just worked for me. So I really appreciated that. And that's what I learned from martial arts, from the Shorin-ryu style, and applying it to my everyday life. So I took that, and that became central to my personality as I grew up.
How long did you train with him?
So I was there, let's see, I went to school in 1986 and I graduated in 1990. So I was in that school for 4 years.
Wow.
I probably I was middle belt. I think they only had. I don't think they had 10. If they had 10, maybe they had 10 belts, but it was a really really old school type of mentality where they didn't have 74 belts where each belt cost $60, and it wasn't a money making machine operation, which I really enjoyed and appreciated because I have been in those schools.
Right.
But yeah, I forget. Yeah, so 4 years, I didn't get my black belt with them, and probably because it's old school and you really have to demonstrate your stuff, and it was cumulative. So you had to all of your white belt stuff that you learned day one, you had to master and know it for when you went for your black belt, which
Right.
isn't necessarily the same in all schools.
True.
And then it was a really great time in my life because I actually had knees back then. I could run, and I would jog from my apartment on Michigan State campus, maybe 2.5 miles downtown East Lansing. I'd work out and then I would jog back, and it was a great, great workout. I don't think I could do that now. I think I'd die.
I just looked him up. He actually received his 10th degree black belt in 2001.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he received his
Wow.
Hanshi. So yeah, looks like, and if this is correct, he may, I don't know if he's still teaching or not, but it looks like he's still with us. But yeah, 10th degree black belt in 2001.
Yeah. Wow. And a small guy, and you would never know it because he's the most humblest person I've met. And he was talking about a chucklehead. He was kind of a chucklehead himself.
Oh.
Very nice. And you would never know that he was an expert martial artist because he just held himself so in a humble way. But you just knew that he could put you on your butt in a second.
I think that's the way with a lot of the Asian masters. Like you'd never know seeing them.
Right. Exactly.
They look every day and look normal, and
right.
Hopefully you don't piss them off.
Right. Exactly. So one funny story was we had a Macarora or something like that. I think that's what it's called. Yep. And I would go downstairs and I would punch the Macarora and with my right fist and my left fist. And they were big on working the two knuckles, and you really want to get the two knuckles calloused and strong. And even to this day, I haven't been doing it, but my middle knuckle is extended out because of that Macarora. And I think it's a great exercise. It kind of deforms your knuckles a little.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually had to use it for self-defense, it's obviously a good training method. So I went down there and I did it 500 times because that was the joke that the guy and I were talking about. He'd call me Judge. Yeah, you got to do it now 500 times. So I worked up to 100, then to 200. And when I was really in that good shape, I was 19 maybe, and I was hitting it, and I went up to 500. And I ran up to the guy and I said, hey, I hit it 500 times. And then he looks at me and he says, yeah, but your knuckles aren't bleeding. Continue. So that, that was the mentality in this school. And it was refreshing. It wasn't that, and he said it in a kind of a joking way, but a serious way, because, that's what it takes in order to push yourself and to become, I guess, the best version of yourself. And if it doesn't bleed, it's probably not going to be as strong. And that was, it kind of opened my eyes. I said, oh, wow, I have to do it a little more until it bleeds. But that was kind of so it was old school. I've never been to a school like that since then. Perhaps one other school was close, but that was really the old school. I really enjoyed it. And that was my first exposure to martial arts, and I loved it. I wish I continued in Shaolin, to tell you the truth. And if I had to protect myself right now, I probably would revert back to my beginnings, and I would probably block with both hands and counterattack. And it's just ingrained in my brain. Even the black belt movements that I know from Shaolin Kenpo would probably come out, but that basic block counterattack from Shaolin style is just ingrained, and I probably would use it to this day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you said you were there 4 years. What happened then in your
So,
martial arts journey after?
Yeah, and then I went to another fabulous school in Framingham, Massachusetts. Tony Anisi. He was a Shotokan and an Aikido expert. He was also very old school, and he had a great school. He was an interesting guy because he was an expert at both the hard style and the fluid Aikido, using the weight of your aggressor. And I asked him how he can do it. It's sort of like being a schizophrenic because you have to be really strong in the Shotokan, very similar to the Shorin-ryu, but a little more stronger Japanese boom. You're in your horse stance. Whereas Aikido, you're doing these flowing movements, circular movements. And I said, they seem to be opposites. And then he looked at me and he says, when you get to a certain point, they become, two sides of the same coin. And I thought that was an interesting perspective because you wouldn't think necessarily if you're going to hold your ground, that's the same thing or the other side of the coin of flowing circular movements. But I don't think I've reached that pinnacle yet to really truly understand what he was trying to communicate. But he was probably instrumental in my martial arts training to really understand the body and strategy. He would bring his class and we would all sit down in front of a whiteboard. And he would do this randomly through class. And then he would draw his stick figures of a person and another person. And he would say, this is a triangular idea. But if you get the center of gravity of a person past the center of mass, they're going to fall. So he used those ideas to teach us how to defend ourselves. And he would tell us that if we have to block and we're inside the person, meaning that the person can retaliate quickly with a right or a left, and you're inside directly looking at his chest, then you have to be fast and quick. Whereas if you're on the outside of the individual and you block, say, a right hand and you move his right hand, so now you're facing the side of him or her, usually a him, and then you don't actually have to be very, very fast, and you can take an extra split second to come back with a more powerful maneuver like a sidekick. So he was fabulous in teaching me ideas about where you are if you're defending yourself, and if you're inside the right punch or on the outside of a right punch. And then that dictates your next move, usually running away or walking away. He was also big on not fighting, which I like, because probably after being in Master Iha's class with Shorin-ryu, I realized the damage that you can do if you actually were to hit someone and an elbow into someone's face. You don't really want to do that. So learning martial arts, one of the biggest things I realized was just not fight, because you can devastate someone and you really don't want to do that. So martial arts became more of an aerobic exercise for me. I wanted to better myself, and it gave you a lot of confidence because, you just don't want to get into a fight ever.
That's smart.
And he also said, I think he said something really nice. Tony Anisi said, the goal of a martial artist, other than aerobics and staying healthy and trying to better yourself with your style, is to end hostility. And I really took that to heart. So if you ever were in an altercation, all you want to do is end hostility. And he would repeat that several times. And I took that, and that resonated with me. So, walk away if you can, push someone away if you have to, block someone and then don't do anything else, or just take them down with a sweep and try to subdue them in a non-aggressive manner. That's what he would preach. And so those were my two initial interactions with the martial arts. So 4 years with Master Iha in East Lansing, and then I was in Framingham for 2 years. Unfortunately, they weren't the same style, and I was moving around. And then I moved down to Virginia, and I had done these 2 Japanese hard styles, and there wasn't anything similar in Richmond, Virginia in 1992. when I started my graduate work. So I started taking Taekwondo.
Okay.
And I loved it. So I said, all right, well, and then my friends would joke with me that I always start back at white belt. And I was the oldest white belt. So, which, I've been in a lot of styles and I have a lot of white belts. So, and Taekwondo was a different type of philosophy, a different style. I liken Taekwondo as a young person martial arts because the kicks are a lot more flowing, and you have to do a lot of jumping and turning and twisting. And if your knees aren't good, like mine aren't right now, other than a front kick, I can't do that much. So it really is for the young at heart. But I loved it, and so I was there, I don't know, 6 years off and on. Being in graduate school, obviously, I was a lot more busy,
Right.
so I couldn't work out as often as I wanted to. This school was a decent school. I think they wanted to make money, and I totally understood that.
Mm-hmm.
My two schools that I first went to were fabulous. This one, gave me an outlet to work out, and didn't get my black belt there, probably because it was more of an off and on thing.
Okay.
But the kicks, boy, Taekwondo kicks are great. I was reading an article about the Taekwondo elbow moves, which
Mm-hmm.
we didn't really focus on, but that would have been fun to learn.
Yeah, my in Taekwondo, my first ever time breaking a brick was with my elbow. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah. So I went two Japanese styles, then I did Taekwondo. I realized from Tony Anisi that, and from Master Iha, the experts from, I guess, from Korea were taken by China when they invaded, and then by Japan when they invaded. So my understanding is martial arts, the real martial arts started in Korea, but that might be inaccurate. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if anyone knows.
it depends what experts you talk to.
Right.
If you do like reading martial arts books, there's a really great book I've talked about a couple times on a few episodes called "The Killing Art: The True History of Taekwondo."
Oh, nice.
It's actually it's definitely not. If you've learned anything about the history of Taekwondo, this is completely different. So it's kind of interesting. It's a really good read. But yeah, like you said, who knows? I mean, it's anyone who claims to be an expert on it, they learned it from someone else who learned it from someone else who learned it from someone else, and
Right.
no one we know it was there when it started. So it's all hearsay, and
Yep.
who knows?
Exactly. So I guess we moved. I met my wife, who I'm still married to. We have two kids now in Fargo.
Nice.
We went out to San Francisco to do our postdocs, and that's where I met Great Grandmaster Ralph Castro.
So was he recommended, or was it just complete happenstance that you met him?
Because of my experience in Virginia and wanting to get back to old school, like the two awesome schools that I had first experienced, I went and I interviewed dojos and different martial arts schools.
Do you remember some of the other styles I'm just curious about that.
Boy, I think there was, I think I looked at, I don't remember who was teaching them or the names, but I looked at an Aikido.
Okay.
I looked at I don't think there was a Shorin-ryu. I probably would have gone back to Shorin-ryu had I could, because it was my first love.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Ninjutsu one that I looked at, and that was fun, but it was too much like judo. And I was a track runner and I have big legs, and I kind of wanted to do more kicks.
Okay.
I've gone to schools where the so-called black belt would show me a few moves and what their philosophy was, and he had me hold a bag, and as I was holding the bag, he would demonstrate a side kick, and he hit me. Jeez. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to go to this school if their black belt doesn't have enough knowledge to actually hit a big, boxing bag.
Wow.
And instead he misses that target and he hits me holding the bag. So
yeah.
I said, I don't think you're a very good black belt. So, black belts aren't all created equally. And just like all schools aren't created equally, some people want to make money, and I get that. But others are old school
And I'm an old school martial artist. I like to train. I like to prepare. I like to become better and better as I can be. There's someone always going to know more martial arts than you. So you just be humble and go about your business. And yeah, end hostilities. I really like that. And I've never been in a fight in my life other than my sixth grade Kevin Crochetier. He and I got in a fight by the reservoir in Winchester, Massachusetts. And that was my only fight that I've ever been in.
Nice.
And it was actually amicable. We walked home afterwards together.
How fighting used to be.
Yeah, right. So I've never been in a fight, nor would I ever want to be. My kids asked me whether or not I could defend myself now. And I said I probably could, but that's kind of funny. So yeah, so I would work out with Ralph Castro. He also had some excellent, talented, really, really talented black belts in his school. Nice people. They would live in the school. I'm not sure if they called it a dojo. That's Japanese. But their school, they would live there. And Ralph Castro with his wife, and he has a lot of children, and the children were really, really talented. And you could just see, Ralph Castro, his ability and his demeanor on the floor, his ability to make the moves. It was just so fluid. And I liken it to, anyone in their craft, like a professional football player or baseball player, how smooth they are in doing their movements. You could just see that, he understood these movements that he apparently, with another person, they came up with these moves themselves, which is even more impressive to me.
Yeah, it's his style that he got his original training with William K.S. Chow in Hawaii, who's the same person who trained Ed Parker for martial arts nerds like me. So
right, there you go. And let's see, I would liken, I don't know if Ralph Castro would agree with me, but it was a fast fist style Shaolin Kenpo. There wasn't, coming from Taekwondo, we definitely didn't do a lot of flowery kicks and turning around. Ralph, he would always say, you don't want to turn and spin, because then you're taking your eyes off your opponent. So, the philosophy was a little different, and it was really fast. It wasn't as powerful as a Tony Anisi's Shotokan style. Even the Shorin-ryu was a little more powerful. Whereas Ralph Castro's philosophy was hit him 7 times instead of just once, really strongly. So it was just a different way of thinking. So again, it was kind of like that question I asked Tony Anisi, the turning and circular movements of Aikido versus the strong, powerful Shotokan. They're kind of one and the same. And Ralph Castro's version was fast and hit multiple times instead of actually digging in with a strong fighting stance and coming in with your hips with one punch. So I enjoyed that dichotomy and that difference in philosophies, and I would just eat it up, and it was fun. I would drive my motorcycle from my apartment in the Sunset District. I went to school. I was a postdoc at UCSF, so I'd drive my motorcycle on the highway, and that was fun. And the school, there was a practice area, and I've met some really good friends, and I still have some friends. A kind of a sad story, my friend Brandon Jebbins, who I met there, he became a black belt with me.
I see his name on the list, actually.
Yeah, he just recently died of brain cancer.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
I think last January, and that was a sad time. And he was a great, great guy. He was from Hawaii, or spent some time in Hawaii. And he and I started at white belt. We went up the ranks together. I met some really interesting people, some people from Biogenics or some biotech company, some other people from UCSF, some other people who were in very eclectic, different types of professions. One was a bus driver, one was in biotech. There was some lawyers. You meet all these different types of people, and they really, really were talented at martial arts. So I really enjoyed that time. I was there for 6 years, and I'm happy to be a Shaolin Kenpo black belt. I'm a little upset at myself because, life happens. And when I left, and I learned so much, we would do this gauntlet, and it was a maneuver where we would walk down and we'd have 6 people, 3 on either side. And it was not choreographed at all. So it would help you understand movements, the weights of whether the person had their weight on the right side or the left side. Were they attacking with a right punch, left punch, a kick? What were they doing? You had no idea, and it was a gauntlet. And it was probably the most fun I had training in martial arts, because that's probably the most difficult thing for me to understand if I ever had to defend. It's what do you actually have to defend, because you don't know what the person's going to do.
Right.
And it's kind of like poker, where you have to identify what the person is trying to do before they actually do it, so that you can be a half second ahead of them. And that was fun. I got hit in the face a lot, and I would get hit in the gut a lot because I wouldn't do the right move. But then slowly, as you do this more often, it was fun, because if you did the gauntlet well on that Saturday when we were doing it, it was just this big rush. So that was a great exercise that I did. And I wish I continued it. So when I left, I came here and I would go down to the racquetball court at the Y, and I would do all of my forms, and that's what I'd do it. And because of my initial training with Master Iha, I would stretch, I'd do my kicks, I'd do my dance 1, dance 2, dance 3, dance 4, and I just continued to do that, and I did it alone. And it was fun. It was a good aerobic workout. I was sweating by the end. And I would do that I came here in 2004 after I got my black belt. I probably did it for at least 5 years, pretty consistently on my own.
Okay.
And then, off and on, I went down to, I think it's Running Tiger down in Minneapolis.
Yeah, David Meyer. Yep.
David Meyer. And I worked out with him a few times. I wish I continued it. It's only 3 hours away, but 2 kids, running a laboratory, doing research, trying to get tenure. And so I kind of stopped, but my kids do it now, or they did do it, and they went to a Taekwondo school here in Fargo. I wanted to at least expose them to it.
Okay.
And my daughter's in the background. She says she still wants to do it, but she wants to do more of a what do you want to do? Jiu-jitsu. She wants to do.
Okay. Oh, there's some great jiu-jitsu instructors in Fargo. So.
All right. So maybe after COVID, when we can get together and actually work out together. That's sort of a long version of my martial arts experience.
So when you got to Fargo, did you look at any schools and consider another style, or did you not want to start over a 4th time?
Yeah. I knew I wanted to continue to work out, but no, I think I had started and stopped so many different times. And once you get a black belt, I was given, when Ralph Castro gives you a black belt, I don't know if he did it with all his black belts, but with me, he gave me the title of Ripping Tiger. And that's the 4th dance in our system.
Okay.
And he would name a black belt based upon the personality. So he says that I was like a ripping tiger.
Okay.
So, and that was a humbling acknowledgement that he gave me. And the rationale is that each person who gets their black belt is bestowed to maintain the authenticity of the dance that they're called after. So Ripping Tiger is mine, and I need to make sure that I maintain it through the eons, I guess. I probably haven't done that to the best of my ability, but I think I could probably do it. And I have, randomly, I'll be in the kitchen waiting for my toast, and then I'll do it. And my kids think I'm crazy. But awesome. Yeah, I didn't really look for another school because I was tired starting all over again. There's a certain a coolness to that, just starting all over, and that's fine. There's no ego with me from black belt going to white belt. I don't care. It is kind of funny. I did start to train again. So to answer your question, I didn't really look, and I tried to keep my Shaolin Kenpo. I went down and worked with David Meyer a few times, but life just got a hold of me, and I stopped training. When my kids were born and they grew up, we went to the ATA Taekwondo here. Master Bayer, he's a very talented martial artist himself, and I would work out as a white belt, and it was funny because you know when you have crutches and you're walking through a door and people hold open the door and they might even start talking louder because they think that you're handicapped or something. So when you have this training, you come in as a white belt. I just keep my head down and I would do my thing, and I try to learn the movements. And these black belts that I might be working out with on any random Saturday, they would say after we train, "Wow, you have some really nice balance." And I would just say, "Thank you." But the belt telegraphs your level of knowledge, right?
Yep.
So, and in Taekwondo, I wasn't that knowledgeable, but I had some balance from my other styles. And that would be fun. It would also be a little frustrating too, because I would want to learn more and at a faster pace. But because I was a white belt, I had to go over here to this side of the mat and learn this front kick, and which is fine because you always can improve your front kick. But I wanted to learn at probably a faster, more advanced style. Although one thing that I still would like to do, and I think if my knees hold out, I would like to learn a weapon. And I never learned a weapon, and probably because Master Iha told me, he says, and there were some weapons in East Lansing's dojo, and he said it was one of his black belts, the guy who called me judge, and I asked him, I wanted to learn a weapon. He holds out his hands and he says, "Hold out your hands." And I did. And he says, "Are you experts at these yet?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, then don't learn a weapon yet." So again, old school, and and that kind of made sense to me. So, but now that I have the balance and I understand how to defend, like the bow staff, something a longer, a stick, something that you could find in everyday life, like an umbrella or something like that.
Yep.
I would really like to learn the bow staff.
Oh, we should get together sometime and do some training. So.
Oh yeah, please.
I have access to many weapons at the school I train at, and we can definitely get together some weekend or something and practice if you want to.
Awesome.
That'd be fun. Did you ever, in all your years doing it, did you ever teach? Were you like an assistant? Did you ever teach class?
I don't, if I ever taught a class, it might've been some random, "Hey Glenn, why don't you warm everyone up?"
Okay.
I don't think I went into the teaching, ironically, since I teach for a living.
Right.
It would be fun. I think I could do it. I don't know if I'd have the patience to teach little kids.
It's different.
But yeah, I definitely could teach an adult class. That would be fun. Because I've learned from so many different awesome martial artists in their own right, I could blend all of that knowledge. And that would be fun. But no, I didn't do a lot of teaching. I might have warmed up a class here or there, but I did do some one-on-ones.
Okay.
And for example, as I was going up the ranks in all of these different styles, if a white belt came in and they were my size, they would say, "Glenn, can you run through these set of blocks or these set of maneuvers?" And we would do that. So there was that type of one-on-one teaching, but nothing really organized on my part.
Okay. Let's say if someone approaches you, it's either a friend or maybe someone asking about either themselves or their kids, and they say, we're thinking of getting involved in martial arts. I'm thinking of putting my kids in martial arts. What are some tips you'd give that person who's thinking of getting involved? What to look for, what to avoid in schools and instructors?
I think the advice that I would give is that not all schools are not created equally. All black belts and martial artists aren't created equally. It's just like in any other discipline. Take 10 lawyers. Some lawyers are just more talented at debating. Other lawyers are more talented at research and writing. So you want to look at, I think the first thing that I would do is to look at the person running the school and to see how skilled that individual is.
Okay.
You want to look at the black belts and see, is this a school of 300 people or is this a school of 50? Are they trying to master? Does it look at, and that's kind of hard if you just go once or twice. But if you talk to the black belts, if you hold a bag and the black belts can hit the bag, I think that's probably one of the first things I would do to see if they can pull off a reasonable side kick without hitting you, which again happened to me.
Yep.
It's hard. Maybe the number of belts. There are some schools that have way more than 10 belts, and I think that that's just a money-making scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And I would watch the classes. I would see whether they are technically oriented. Do they just go through the motions of a front kick, a side kick, and then they do one dance, and then they do another dance, and then they get their pads and they work together? Or are they asking questions, and does the instructor stop class and say, the reason that we're doing this movement in this dance is because of this scenario? And then they'll break it down and they'll show you why you're doing a horse dance in this particular portion of the dance. And the reason that you're doing this is because there's two people that you're fighting. And if you don't break the dances down and the movements down, and to understand why the movements are the way they are, you don't really have a context for the maneuvers. And I've seen some schools that really ignore this. So that's number of belts and attention to detail and understanding a context to the movements, I think are important. We would have in Ralph Castro school, we would have a right hand would be a fist, and we'd come into an open-handed left hand and we would bow. And at Ralph Castro, you'd take your right hand to your chest and you would just salute with a knife edge. And someone asked me, why are we doing that? And I said, I don't know. And it's like, well, it's an attack to the neck. So you have to understand the techniques, and you have to understand why you're doing the techniques. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of schools sometimes don't emphasize that aspect. Tony Anisi would take us to the whiteboard to understand strategy. If you're on the inside of a person, on the outside of the person, that will dictate your next move. That's really important. And understanding the movements. One thing that I learned in Master Iha's class, the horse dance. Why is it called the horse dance? And they taught me that it was because when you're riding a horse, that's the position, and they would practice while on horses.
I've heard that too.
And then we would get paper, and we would, the horse stance has to be in a particular manner. And we would get paper, and we would have to take our feet on the paper and then move our feet from outward so that our heels and our toes would be parallel to each other, but before they were concave and pointing towards each other. And then we would sort of crease the paper in a particular way. And I forget if we did this in East Lansing or in Framingham, but it was that attention to detail to understand what's a horse stance, what's a front stance, what's a side stance, and why do we do these things, and that triangulation. And if your center of gravity goes over a certain point, your opponent's going to fall or you will fall. Those types of attention to details, I think, is really, really important. That's hard. That's hard to find out if you just go to a class once.
Right.
So I think my other recommendation is be patient and watch the class, talk to people, ask them, if you go for your next belt and you pay X number of dollars, will you get your belt? And if the answer is they snicker and they say, yeah, well, it's probably not a school where they have attention to detail.
Right.
I think that if you don't master your movements, you shouldn't move on. And one of the greatest things Tony Anisi told me, he says, he was, I think, fifth degree, I forget what he is, And he didn't want to go up to 6th degree because he didn't think he was good enough to get up to 6th degree, because his teacher was 7th or 8th, and he didn't think he was good enough to be that close to his teacher.
Wow.
And that's the humbleness that I really appreciate. And if you speak to someone who knows martial arts, and if they are humble, that's the first indicator that they know what they're talking about. As I said, if you start to study, you know the damage you could do to another human being with an elbow or a palm to the face, and you just don't want to do that. But if you talk to someone who's cocky and they say, yeah, I can do this and that just turns me off. So those are the things that I would try to tell someone to look for. You want humbleness, you want attention to detail, you want maybe 10 belts or even less. And you also want to ask, how long does it take to get your black belt? And if it's 2 years, turn around and go to another school.
Yep. Agree completely. So now you've been in primarily traditional martial arts, for over 20 years. What are your thoughts on MMA and the UFC?
Oh, wow. I don't watch a lot of it.
Okay.
I grew up watching boxing more, the octagon and all of that. I don't watch much of it. I think it definitely highlights an additional element to just standard boxing. I don't think I would last more than 6 seconds against one of those guys. Wow. I think it's kind of brutal. I don't know if that necessarily is what I perceive as martial arts. It's sort of more fantasy. This is kind of what you see in the movies, and they're obviously great athletes, and they know how to fight and protect themselves and do damage to another person. It's just not my thing, I think, based upon my training and my philosophy of ending hostilities. It's more of a sport, and I appreciate it from the sports side, and people can make a living, but it's not for me.
That's great. That's a good answer. So you mentioned philosophy, which brings me to my next question. So in all your years of martial arts, is there one philosophy that stands out for you?
Martial arts is a means to prepare yourself athletically, aerobically, mentally, to reach a balance in your life, and really has nothing to do with fighting. In fact, it's probably the furthest from fighting in reality that I could think of. And yet everyone thinks, oh, you're a black belt, you can kick someone's butt. But it really, so the philosophy I have, it's ending hostilities. You never want to do this. You walk away if you can. It's a challenge. It's a personal internal challenge trying to perfect yourself, which you never will achieve. And there's a beauty in that to me.
Nice. If you had to pick one martial artist to put on the top of your list for that you admire, and it can be someone you've worked out with, it can be just someone from like a movie or someone that you've heard about in history. If you had to pick just one martial artist to put at the top of your list, who would that be?
Oh wow. Is Bruce Lee a real answer? Can I do that?
Actually, I think probably 5 or 6 people have said him already, so that's definitely an answer.
Well, I guess from the movies, Bruce Lee was just phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
and I have read some books about him, and I think what he said when two experienced martial artists came to teach or to train with him, he had they were drinking tea, and he made them pour out their tea, and he says, "Now hold up your cup." And he says, "I'll train you as long as you'll allow me to refill your tea of knowledge." And then he poured them a new glass of tea. And I thought that was very nice, because, every martial artist has slight different movements and philosophies, and people. So that embodied the following idea. My friends would make fun of me because I started at white belt 7,000 times. And they said, well, what's the best martial arts? Is it Aikido? Is it Shotokan, Shorin-ryu, Shaolin Kenpo, Taekwondo? And I said, the style doesn't matter, in my opinion. It's kind of like saying, what's the fastest sneaker? Like Adidas, Nike, it's the feet that are in the sneaker.
Yep.
So it's the martial artist who perfects the movements. And I think if done correctly, Tai Chi master would be deadly.
True.
Yeah, so I guess I'd go with Bruce Lee. If I had to go with people that I've trained with, like I said, Master Iha was fabulous in any of his black belts. The guy who called me judge was just great. Tony Anisi is very, very talented and knowledgeable person in Massachusetts. And then obviously great grandmaster Castro. Some of his kids were phenomenal martial artists. There was another person, and he was a great guy, Master Cunningham in the school, and I really liked him because he was down to earth, big guy, powerful guy, but again humble, and he knew his stuff, and he had this way of doing his movements that was really fun to watch, and he was loud. He would go, when he hit, he really was loud.
Nice.
In his key eyes. Yeah, those are the people I admire. Steven Seagal, I admire. I don't know but he seems to be a legitimate martial artist. Who's the other guy in Bloodsport?
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I always like because he's big. He's a big guy.
Yeah, and he started in Shotokan, actually. Was his first style. So
okay, cool. Wow, you know a lot more than I do. Good. I talk to you
when it comes
often.
to this, I'm a nerd. So, so this one, favorite martial arts book.
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. That one where I read that story about Bruce Lee, that was good. But I read another one, and it was about a dropout from college, and he went to China, and he learned from the Shaolin monks. And I think it was I forget it was like and there on the cover of the book was like a McDonald's sign or a cheeseburger or something like that, and it was his story going through China and learning from the actual experts that he met, and the stories that he lived through. And I'm assuming it's accurate and nonfiction. I guess I don't have anything to corroborate it, and I forget the title. Maybe if I do some research on it, I can get you the title.
That's not the book American Shaolin. I think that one
is that it.
Well, I know that one. I have the book, and it has a picture of a Shaolin monk holding a Burger King bag.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. By Matthew Pauly. That's actually a really, really good book.
Yeah. I love that.
I completely forgot about that book until you mentioned it. So
yeah,
it's a great book.
And it would just show you how the different philosophies of an individual. So they would have, if you wanted to get an iron forearm, you wake up and you hit a stick and then a rock like 10 times, and you do it every single day of your life. And they have some pictures that are very interesting. I think you might remember some of those pictures that aren't necessarily G-rated, but you can get any part of your body rock solid. And I thought that was just a really cool idea, and it just demonstrates the human spirit. If you want to do it, you do it.
Yeah, I need to reread that. I think that came out in early to mid 2000s, so I need to pull that one off my shelf and read it again. So
okay.
All right, so being you kind of grew up in the 70s and 80s, I'm curious if you'll have an answer for this one or not, but do you have a favorite martial arts video game? Were you a video game guy in the 80s or
Yeah, what's that one? They played that in Bloodsport. I get Mortal Kombat. Kind of, sort of.
Well, it's funny. The one they played in Bloodsport. I mean, because the Bloodsport supposedly took place in like 1973, and the video game they were playing didn't come out until like 1979. So that's the thing I remember seeing in that. But I can't remember which one. Yeah, I can't remember which game that was. I know what you're talking about, but yeah. I know that one I always liked. I was telling someone on another interview there was a game on my Commodore 64 called Bruce Lee. That came out in like the mid 80s, and I actually went and found a YouTube video of it, and man, those graphics.
I know, it's kind of funny.
That's cool. All right, so final two questions. Favorite martial arts TV show?
I guess I would have to go, this probably everyone says this, the Carradine show.
Kung Fu.
Kung Fu.
Actually, my last four guests have said that. Not everyone says that, but my last four have.
I appreciate when they did when they would go back in time
to the
temple.
And
it would always be relevant to the experience that he was having at that moment. And those comments of maim instead of kill, and break an arm instead of maim, and just walk away instead of fighting, those types of some of it is kind of silly and corny, but it also is founded in some good philosophy. I think he said, Master, how is it that you can see all of this and you're blind? And then he says, young one, how is it that you cannot? And I just loved it.
Nice. And I know at the beginning you kind of mentioned you loved martial arts movies. So favorite martial arts movie? And if you can't narrow it down, you can name a couple. Obviously, I know something like me, I can never pick just one.
Because of the story, even though it wasn't martial arts story-esque, but The Matrix has some really cool martial arts that I thought.
Yep.
Enter the Dragon obviously is awesome.
Yeah.
But there's some what's the one? I think I was watching it with my daughter and I didn't know it was R-rated. Ip Man. Ip Man, yeah. Some of those scenes are phenomenal.
Oh yeah, Donnie Yen, amazing in those movies.
Yeah. Yep. And it's really fun. I mean, there's a lot of movies out there where the person doing the moves are obviously not a martial artist, and you can tell. Although the camera does really help sell it. But then if they really do understand how to stand and they have balance and they can do these moves and you don't have to cut with the camera, it's enjoyable.
And Donnie Yen definitely has that martial arts background. So, I mean, I think he's been training for quite a while. But yeah, no, that's Ip Man. Those are ones I'll rewatch over and over. And I think there's been four of them, I believe. 4 or 5. So yeah.
And I told my kids when they're 17, we'll watch Bloodsport.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a great movie. That's the one I just watched that a couple months ago actually, and it's for the most part it holds up. I mean, the acting definitely not the greatest, but the martial arts is always fun. I mean, there's a handful of those I watch all the time. I'll watch, Roadhouse is another one we were just talking about with another guest.
Sure.
Some great martial that obviously another one that's rated R. So
right.
Probably not with the kids, and I just rewatched Karate Kid again about 2 months ago, and yeah, that's very cool. Well, I just want to thank you, Glenn. This has been a lot of fun. I know we've chatted through email many times over the years, but seriously, invitation is open if you ever want to go in on a weekend and work on some bow staff or even just kick or punch a heavy bag. Definitely get a hold of me. More than willing to do that, and it's been fun hearing your story. I said only when I first chatted with you, I only knew about the Ralph Castro stuff. I didn't know about your other styles, which was kind of fun. And so always good to talk to people and learn about their backgrounds.
Well, good. I'm glad we did this. This was great, and I hope people liked it.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.